Hi, way cool friends and family, Chef Mary here, and I am super excited today because I get to make apple cinnamon donuts with you all. So I've got everything I need here for my fall baking kit to make some delicious apple cinnamon flavored fall donuts. It basically is the best of all things of fall. Apples, cinnamon, and well, donuts are the best all the time. So this donut recipe is really easy to follow. In your kit, you got a cookbook with the recipes in it. And so I'm just gonna kind of walk you through how to make the batter today to help you with any little kind of tips here along the way as you are creating your donuts. First thing we wanna do though is we wanna get our donut pan and oven ready. There's nothing worse than baking and forgetting to preheat your oven, and that's why they always put it as step number one. So I've gone ahead and I preheated the oven to 350 degrees today. That's ready to go. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna prep my baking pan. So because we're baking these donuts, we're gonna use a special silicone donut pan here today. And this is great, it's washable. You can throw it in your dishwasher, it's awesome. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take and put a little nonstick spray inside of the little cavities where the donuts are gonna hang out so that when they are done baking in the oven, we can allow them to cool and they're just gonna pop right out like an ice cube tray. So when you're spraying a pan, you wanna make sure that you don't spray it so close that you end up with pooling nonstick spray, because then that'll leave you like with oily, greasy donuts. But you also don't wanna spray too high in a way that your whole counter and floor top end up slipping and sliding. I've done that before. That's also very dangerous. So you wanna kind of make sure that you're spraying it over the countertop at about 8 to 10 inches away. And I just like to give it a couple little poofs right over the top to make sure that that area that I want is covered and it's ready to go. If you do get too much, you can always take a paper towel and wipe out the excess too. So our pan is prepped, ready to go. Don't need that anymore. I'm gonna move that out of the way. I'm gonna set that right up there for when we're ready for it. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make our batter for our donuts. And so anytime you're baking, a general rule is all of the dry stuff likes to hang out together and all of the wet stuff likes to hang out together. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna combine our dry ingredients and make sure that they are what is called homogeneous. And what that means is that they're all fully incorporated together so that like one donut doesn't get all the cinnamon and one donut doesn't get all of the baking powder. And so that's exactly what we're gonna do. I'm gonna start with a nice big bowl here. And I'm gonna add in 1 3/4 cup of flour. And so I've got that measured out here. We wanna make sure that it's nice and level when you're measuring. And with all of these dry ingredients, the key is to kind of keep things fluffy so that your donuts are also fluffy. And so I've got then my container with my other dry ingredients. So this is the salt, baking powder, cinnamon, and a little bit of nutmeg. And so we're gonna take and we're gonna sprinkle that all over the top of this evenly in our little bowl. And because they're all dry things, they can all go into the same bowl together, which is great because we added them all at the same time. And so you don't have to measure out the nutmeg and the salt all separately. You can just measure them and put them all in one bowl. And then I'm gonna use a whisk. So sometimes baking recipes will ask for you to sift the ingredients together, but not everybody has a sifter at home. And so what you can do is you just take your whisk and I'm gonna stir up the ingredients here in this bowl to make sure that they are all incorporated in together. And it's easy with the cinnamon to see that because the cinnamon is equally distributed throughout the flour mixture. All right, so I'm gonna set this off to the side right now. That part is done. Our dry ingredients are all ready to go. And so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create and get my wet ingredients bowl together. And so I've got another big glass bowl here and I've got my heavy duty favorite spatula that I'm gonna take, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna cream butter and sugar together. And that process is where you take the sugar, and I've got brown sugar and I've got a 1/4 cup of white sugar, and I'm just gonna kind of loosely combine them together first in the bowl and mix those up so that they're easier to cream with the butter. Now, if you have a stand mixer at home, you can also do this within or a hand mixer. You can do this with a hand mixer too. This is a great way to build your cooking muscles, and so I'm gonna do it by hand with my spatula. And then I'm gonna take and I'm gonna add 10 tablespoons of butter. So that is 1 full stick of butter plus 2 tablespoons. And this butter is at room temperature a little bit. It's softened, so it's smushy. And I'm gonna take and I'm going to unwrap that. Don't want the wrapper in our donuts. And I'm gonna put that in there. And I'm gonna take and I'm gonna start smashing the butter into the sugar. And this process of creaming is really cool because what you're actually doing is a lot of science just by smushing butter and sugar together. What we're doing is we're taking the fat from the butter and we're kind of wrapping it around the sugar so that when the sugar melts in the oven when it's baking, it creates little steam pockets, and so it creates actual air inside of your donut and helps the structure of the donut. It also prevents that sugar from melting and caramelizing on the edges of the donut and creating an actual caramel. That's what would happen. And so I'm gonna take and I'm gonna just keep smashing and stirring and creaming this butter and sugar together until I get it to the consistency of what kind of looks like wet sand. And I wanna make sure that there's no big butter chunks in here, so I'm really using my muscle and getting in here and smushing it. This is a great job for helpers in your kitchen to get them mixing it too. You can also put on a pair of gloves if your butter is a little bit hard and smush it with your fingers together. You just wanna make sure that your fingers aren't too warm so that you melt the butter. We don't wanna have melted butter, we just wanna have softened butter. All right, this is looking great. I'm smushing it, I'm smashing it. The more you smash it, the easier it is and the easier it'll get to kind of get it to come together. And I know I'm good when I can pick up the whole thing and it looks like a pile of wet sand. I could build a sandcastle with that. But we're making donuts. All right, so to this mixture of our creamed butter and sugar, now that that is all equally distributed in our bowl, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add some eggs to it. So this recipe calls for 2 eggs of the 4 you need for the whole kit. And so we're gonna take and I'm gonna crack the egg here on my little egg cracking bowl. I like to use a separate bowl so that in case I get any shells, the shells don't end up in the donut. So I'm gonna just take and I'm gonna crack 1 egg in there. And then the other thing I like to do, and in this recipe it says, is to incorporate the eggs 1 at a time. And the reason we wanna do that instead of throwing them both in there is so that, again, everything is evenly distributed throughout your recipe and so that we can kind of get them mixed all up together. This is always what I call the slimy stage of baking because it's like it's a little slimy in that bowl. But that's okay because eggs are the glue and the protein that hold this together. And so we wanna make sure that we have all of that mixed in. Then I'm gonna add egg number 2, crack that in there. All right, make sure there's no shells. Good, no shells there. Get that in the garbage. And then put that there. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna kind of scramble the egg first in my bowl, and then I'm gonna work it into the butter and sugar mixture that's in here. All right, next I'm gonna beat in the vanilla. So vanilla is gonna give it that beautiful baked goods smell. It's gonna add a little tiny bit to the color as well, and the flavor of the donut. All right, now that I've got that in there, I'm gonna take and I'm gonna trade out my spatula for my whisk so I can really beat that butter and sugar together so it's nice and smooth inside the bowl, and mixing it in an oval shape to get as much air and mix that all in. Okay, that looks pretty well mixed to me. So now I'm gonna take and I'm gonna add the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. And I'm gonna do that by slowly sprinkling it over the mixture here. So it's evenly mixed on top of that there. And then I'm gonna take and I'm gonna start stirring that up so that all of it gets mixed in. This is why I love glass bowls. So you can see everything that's going on in your bowl, from the side of the bowl, from the bottom of the bowl. And then when you get to the point that your whisk is getting full of this batter, because the batter is really, really thick and delicious, I'm gonna tap out my extra batter here. I'm gonna use my fingers. This is why we all wash our hands. And then I'm gonna go back to the spatula, and I'm gonna use my spatula to scrape the outside edges here. And I'm gonna drizzle in my apple cider. And so I'm gonna slowly work that in from the middle, kind of treating it like a well. And so I'm gonna just add more and more of that in there. Thank you so much, Chef Len.
Oh, you're welcome.
Getting all the extra stuff out of the way here so we can see what's going on. It smells like fall. Oh, it smells so good. That apple cider just adds like that extra flavor that it's just like, it screams fall. Okay, so I'm gonna take and I'm mixing that in. It's nice and smooth. And again, we're gonna use that word again, homogeneous, where we make sure that all of the ingredients are mixed up together and they're really, really nice and smooth all the way here. Okay. Now, before we bake, there's one more thing we gotta do. We gotta load up our piping bag so that we can pipe these donuts into this pan here. And so to do that, I'm gonna use a helper here. I'm gonna use a mason jar. And the mason jar is great because you can slide your piping bag inside of it, and then we're gonna open it up. But before we do that, I'm gonna wash my hands. Now, I wash my hands before we start cooking, but it's always nice to wash your hands when things get messy or have a towel handy. So I always have a wet towel handy, ready to go, so that I can just take and make my hands clean so I can go on to the next thing. There's nothing more frustrating than having messy fingers and then trying to do something that requires a lot of details, and then you're just sticky and there's mess everywhere. So taking that one little moment is a really good way to kind of like have a hack in your kitchen to just make baking more fun. I'm gonna open this up. If you don't have mason jars at home, what I do too is, like, if you have a tall cup, that also works. And then I'm gonna take and I'm gonna grab spoonfuls of our batter, and I'm just gonna load it up into our piping bag here. And I shake it down as I go to make room for more batter. And if you have multiple chefs in your kitchen helping you, somebody can actually hold the bag for you too, and then hold it open while the next person scoops the batter in there. I take and smooth that out there. Make sure we get all of the batter for the donuts. Scrape it around the edges. Get that in there. All right. So I like to shake it down, and then it's never gonna get all the way down to the end of the piping bag until we cut it. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take my kitchen scissors and I'm just gonna snip the end off of the piping bag. And it's probably got a little bit less than an inch because that's the size of these donuts. And so I'm gonna take now, and I'm always squeezing from the top. I'm gonna get the batter to go down to the bottom of the bag here. Squeeze from the top of the bag, use 2 hands, go straight over the top, and then I'm just gonna pipe it in 2/3 of the way full. And that is, if you go slow, it's about 1.5 times around the donut. And the reason we want them only 2/3 of the way full is because it's got baking powder and egg in there, which means these donuts are gonna rise in the oven, and we don't want them to rise out of the pan in the oven. So I'm gonna take, and I've got a couple more here to do. And Lynn, what should we do with this extra batter? What if they have extra batter?
It actually makes 12 donuts total.
Oh, because I got like a whole nother set of donuts here.
And you can rest it inside here, and then it won't.
There we go. So back into your mason jar so it doesn't get all over you or the countertop. We're gonna take and we're gonna put our silicone pan on top of a baking sheet. So that way it's not wobbly when it's hot and we wanna take it out of the oven. And we are gonna bake those until they are golden brown, risen on the top, pull away from the sides of the baking container. And that takes about 12 to 15 minutes based on how hot your oven is. I always really like to, at about the halfway point, when I start to smell the donuts, take a little peek inside of the oven and then open it up quickly and rotate the pan so that they bake evenly in the oven as well. All right, while those are baking, we're gonna get set up for our next recipe for our baking kit. And we will be making some delicious caramel rolls and then also some ham pies here in just a second. When they come out of the oven, we're gonna take and we're gonna melt some butter for these, and we're gonna brush them with a pastry brush. If you don't have a pastry brush, what I like to do is just take a clean towel, a kitchen towel, and you can dump that into the butter and help wipe that out, or even a paper towel works too. And then we're gonna take and put cinnamon sugar all over the top of those donuts. And you can see pictures of the finished donuts on our Facebook and on our website, so you can take a picture of what those look like. But we've got so many other recipes that we need to do, so we're gonna leave that part up to your imagination, or check out the final pictures on our website, and we are going to get set for the next recipe.
I have one more tip.
Oh yeah.
Yes, because I made these several times, and
I ate them several times.
But one thing I noticed is because I was so anxious to try them, I tried to eat them while they were still hot, like right away. And because, you know, things hot always taste better, right? But the donuts will crumble and start to fall apart for you unless you let it rest for like 5 to 10 minutes in the pan.
It does say that in the recipe too. It says let them rest in the pan.
You have to do it.
So that's usually a rule I also ignore, but for this case, for the donuts, we'll listen to that rule.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds
Awesome.
good.
All right. So tune in for the next video where we make cinnamon rolls and apple pie hand pies.